Hi, Sumer. Welcome. Let's give folks a second to trickle in. Hi, Anish. Hi, Sabrina. Hi, Navpreet. Good to see you again. I know Navpreet has been to a free prep hour before. Has anyone else been to one of these before? And I would love it if you could say hi. Maybe everyone say hi in the chat and tell us, one, where are you? I'm in Brooklyn, where I live in my apartment. Thank you. This is my second to last day before I take a month leave, and I have been enjoying my time winding down. So I got to go to the beach today, actually, which I love to do. Cool. Oh, Anish, that's so awesome. I really would love to visit Nepal someday. I've heard it's a really special and beautiful place. That's so cool. Yeah. So where are you? This is one of the things that's fun about these, right? Is I get to meet people from all over. Oh my goodness, we have a really far-flung crowd. Taipei. Sabrina, I love Taipei. It's been many years. I was there in like 2008, so really long time ago, but I had a really, really lovely time. I had a friend who was studying there at the time. And Louisville, this is so cool. This is such a roster of places I like. Louisville is awesome. I was there on a road trip with actually the friend I went to Taipei with. We also did a road trip through Louisville. And I weirdly had a bunch of friends who play in the Louisville Orchestra, which is so random. Cool. Athens, Ohio. Rita, I have only been to Ohio once, and that was a very long time ago. But I may be gonna do a road trip to Kansas City, Missouri. So we'll drive through Ohio soon. Welcome. So nice to know where everyone is. I would also love to know, where are you in your GRE prep process? I think that's the other question that's always helpful for you to know. And then, have you been to a free prep hour before? If you've been to a free prep hour of mine, you'll know how they run. I've been running them as these open Q&A sessions for a few months now. Cool. That's great. Being a beginner is great. And I always love when people come as beginners, because hopefully I can give you some tips that will save you some time. And I Yay. Oh, Noelle, I didn't see you come in. Yay. Good to have you here. Cool. So we have all kinds of timelines. This is so fun. We have folks who are beginners. We have folks who are taking the test next week, or in the next couple of weeks. Someone's aiming for one on 12/23. And great. That is a great question. I'm going to answer that question, Anish. How long? But it's a little bit, I have a few things to say about it, so I'm definitely going to answer your question. Cool. 3 weeks away. Great. Awesome. Just writing this down. So the way that I run these, I used to run these as sort of lecture classes, but I've had such small attendances. Oh, hi, Megan, welcome. I've been able to do something else, which is I've been able to run them as open Q&A sessions. So what I would love to know from each of you is this. A lot of the problems we're going to do are going to be from this book, 5-1 book. But if you have like one biggest issue, ask, what do you need today, right? Like, what's a burning question I can answer, or a problem you're stuck with, or where are you, what can I do for you today, basically, if you get one ask. And then I'll collect everyone's requests, and I'll think about it maybe for a couple minutes, and then I'll try to weave together a lesson in which we deal with all of these different things. And the other thing that I am doing that I think will be interesting for everyone, and if anyone has feedback on it, let me know, is I have had really bad Zoom burnouts. One of the reasons I'm going to be off for a while. I'm going to be off from the end of this week to January, mid-January. And so to combat that, I've started using physical materials more in my teaching. So I'm going to be today doing a lot of my work on a physical whiteboard and also maybe on some actual paper, because these are also the two materials, right, that we work with when we take the official test. We take we have like an erasable surface if we're taking the test at home, and we have white paper if we're taking the test at a test center. As everyone is thinking of and asking their questions, I also remember now that I took the official GRE a couple of weeks ago, and I actually took it on Thanksgiving. It was a weird little stunt that I did for myself. I'm just writing down a couple notes. And I want to tell you a little bit about my experience to start today. So as you're thinking of your ask or your question for me, what I can do to help you best today, I want to tell you a little bit about what I saw on the test. And hopefully this will be helpful. Um, great. Hi. Hi, Rita. Hi, Gonzalo. If you're just coming in, just one thing about how this session is going to work. Everyone gets to ask for something and, nominate a specific issue or type of question or specific question they have. I see a couple good options. Ooh, yeah, I see a great question from Anish already in the Q&A function. Please use the Q&A function if you can. Also, if you want to use the chat, that's good too. Yeah, cool. All right, we have some fun things that we're gonna get to. I like it. I think it's gonna go together. Cool. But let me tell you a little bit about my experience with the official GRE first. So I took the test on Thanksgiving. I don't know why I did that, but I did. And I'd been working pretty late the night before. So I'm going to tell you what I did, because this is the opposite of what you should do, right? So folks who have a test date, your test is super soon. Other folks who have a test date really soon. I worked late the night before. Then I was really wound up, and so I went out with a friend. I went to bed late. I woke up and realized that the erasable surface I had ordered from Amazon 2 days before was not actually going to arrive in time. So I realized I had no erasable surface on Thursday morning. And I then had to sort of make one out of taping together some plastic and paper, because it was Thanksgiving. I couldn't go buy anything. Everything was closed. So this is what you should not do, right? This is my cautionary tale. So for folks who are taking the test in the next few days, in the next week. So this is, I think, super important this time of year, because it's a very busy time of year for many of us in work and in life. So in the 1 week before your test, and believe me, I spend a lot of time convincing people of this. So if you doubt my word, I'm happy to back this up with a lot of anecdotes. Right? Everything I teach just comes from, I've watched people do this for 8 years, right? Over and over again. And I see people succeed, I see people not succeed. Number one thing you can do in the week before your test is rest. This is not, 1 week is not enough time to build new skills. No new skills or content, right? So if you are like, gosh, I've really never understood probability, this is not the time to decide to understand probability, right? And we do that because we get kind of nervous. And, some of us, like me, tend to overfunction, right? So when I get nervous, I try to do more. And this is not the time to do more. The week before is the time to do less. What you can do is adjust strategy. So like short time sets, but not a ton, right? Like, so time sets just to keep fine tuning your timing strategy. And you can do flashcard work, sort of reviewing things you already know, going through old takeaways. But at this point, right, 1 week before, you can still change your score. But the way in which you could change your score is if you make good decisions about timing, right? So the number one thing we can impact is better timing and strategy choices. And to make good decisions under pressure when you are nervous, you must be rested, right? Like we all know that when we're tired, our decision making degrades. So truly the best thing you can do if you are 7 or fewer days away from your official test is to rest. If you are 2 weeks away from your official test, rest is up there with the best things you can do. So that's my pitch for rest, which is really important this time of year. Then the other thing, final thing that I'll say about the official test is I did not see any probability or combinatorics. A lot of times people tell me, they're like, oh, I took the test and I saw a lot of probability and combinatorics. And I always sort of wonder about that, right? Like, why is everyone telling me they saw a lot of probability and combinatorics? Because I have never, right? I've taken the test 6 times, 7, 8 times, I don't know, a bunch of times. Enough times that some of them have started dropping off my ETS records, so I no longer entirely know. But none, no probability or combinatorics that I saw. And I never see a lot, right? And then people say I see a lot. And one thing I've noticed is, this is real, right? I see this is a real feeling, but I don't think it's a real reflection of the test necessarily. Because I know this because I'm bad at probability and combinatorics, right? But I know how to do the GRE well, and I can get a good quant score no matter what. Like even on my, really ill-prepared Thanksgiving Day, I got a 168 in quant. So I know, right? Like I know I can do well here. It's my profession. But I know I'm not good at this because I fail doing these types of problems all the time when I'm teaching, and students bring me some hard probability and there's a 30% chance I won't be able to do it. So I know I'm not good at this, but I know I am good at the GRE. I know there's just not a lot, right? There is not a lot of this stuff on the test. And I think but this is a real experience that my students have, and I don't discount that. And I've thought about this for a long time. And I think the real reason is that people think they see a lot of it proportionally because they overfocus on their weaknesses and struggles. And this is normal. I think we all do this, right? Like if you tell someone 3 compliments and a piece of criticism, they're going to hold that piece of criticism more than the compliments, most likely. So a lot of us do, and I think we're kind of culturally maybe encouraged to, but we overfocus on these things. And so we remember a lot of this, even if it wasn't, even if it was just 2 problems that made us uncomfortable. That's what we remember, not the 10 problems that we could do. And so when I'm working with someone who feels that they see this a lot when they take the official test or have, often an underlying issue that I've noticed, and maybe this is just correlation, not necessarily causation, is just like worry and anxiety. And that becomes a big part of the issue. So I got a really great question in reading comp, and they're about reading comp. So I'm going to start with this question about reading comp, and then I'm going to start moving through the other questions, and probably along the way I'll sprinkle in some little other tidbits about what I noticed on the official test. And if anyone has other questions about that experience, please let me know. I'm happy to go into it more, but that's my little intro. And now I'm going to start working through everybody's questions. So I'm going to start with a great question. And Rita, I'm going to kind of take your question in 2 parts. And part 1 is, I see 2 patterns, right? I see people who get the right answer and then they second guess. And I see people whose first impulse is wrong and then they rethink successfully. And I think it's just one thing is that it's just good to know if you're one of these 2 patterns, right? Because then you can say, I need to have a firm rule that once I pick, once I hit D in reading, I'm done, it's gone, I move forward, I don't circle back. Other people need to maybe do a little circling back or rethinking or checking, right? And it just, people tend to fall into one of these 2 camps. I am in this camp, right? So for me, it's like, once I commit to that answer, I do it. Another little technique that I do. I think there's sort of two things that you can do in general to feel calmer in verbal. And I think that this is also something that is important for um people who are starting out, actually, right? So this is important, I think, both for people who have a test date soon and for people who are starting out. And Noelle, I know you've heard me say this before, and I'm pretty, you probably heard me say this before too, but read slower, right? Like everyone tries to read too fast on a screen. And it means that we get, on the screen, we try to read too fast. And what happens is we don't comprehend, so no understanding or lower understanding. And the other thing that happens when we try to reach our best is we increase our stress levels because we're asking our brain to do something that it is not particularly comfortable doing. So the other thing that you need to know is what's the pace that you need, what everyone just has a speed, right? They need to read at to comprehend. And over again, the number one intervention that I have seen succeed this year in improving reading comp scores and improving reading comp is like one of my longest obsessions, right? Like I used to plan a conference for test prep teachers at Manhattan Prep. We had a conference every year, and the topic I chose was teaching reading comp because it's tricky, right? Reading comp's hard, and it's hard to get better at it, but you can and will. And this is one of the best interventions I've had, is to just say, take more time on the passage, right? More time and more notes, and this again is something that you can really impact in days, right? Is to improve the note taking and to improve the time in the passage, and then you're going to have less time on the questions. So I think that those are two. And Rita, I think your question is, I'm going to come back to the second part of your question in a second, but these are the things I think are most important in verbal, either starting out in your practice or as like fast interventions, right? So an exercise that I teach a lot that I think is helpful for this is to do paired timed passages, right? So to do one, and this is a great one for folks, folks who are beginning. If you're beginning, don't start with time practice, right? So we'll come back to the issue of beginning. But for folks who are in the 1 to 3 week range, right? Like this is a great exercise. And in a month or two for beginners, maybe. One timed RC passage. Assess your notes. How could they assess the passage, like keep track of the passage versus questions time, how you're dividing time, and then commit to one adjustment, just one, and then do another timed RC passage, implementing that adjustment. And then you can, do this once on Tuesday, do it again on Wednesday, do it again on Thursday, and it gets better. And I really, say this because I just sit and I do this, right? I watch people do timed reading passages, and we make an adjustment, and I watch them do another one, and they see that this works, and people get better. And a lot of the interventions that are interventions about note taking and about time. And I will come back to the question of the vocab and the learning words, because that's a little bit separate, right? There can be some separate issues in reading comp with that stuff, and we'll get to it. And so then I think to finish, like there's this other great question here too, that's like, just what do you do in those moments where you get anxious, right? Like moments, let's call them like moments of terror. Because this is so real. And I still, this is something else. The problems where you just look at it and you panic, freeze, start to spiral, whatever it is, you just sort of you second guess, whatever it is, we all have sort of different versions of our moment of terror, right? But I think we all tend to encounter a moment of terror taking these tests. And I did, again, like, there are no stakes for me, right? Because I'm just taking it to learn. And I have done it a ton of times. And yet I still had moments of terror on the test. And what I had to do, and it's happened in a class, the class Noelle was in recently too, where I had to talk myself down after a moment of terror. So I think there's a couple different things you can do with this. One is to know your triggers. Like, I know I will panic when I see horrible word problems, right? When I see a ton of text, let's say in math, I tend to panic more in math. So this will be a cat example. Know your triggers and then have a tool. Have like 1 to 3 tools to use. And I'll tell you some of the ones I use, but you may find that you investigate and have ones that you like better. My tools are to take a deep breath, write a lot down. Write a lot down is a good universal-ish one. In general, we should all write a lot down when we take this test. And if I need to, I will look away briefly. Someone told me at a meditation retreat that if you looked up at the corner where the wall meets the ceiling, like corners, if you look up at them, they can help like stop anxiety. And I don't know if it really works or if it works because someone told me it worked, but I kind of find that useful now. So I'll look up and come back, like, but doing something physical, right? Because once that feeling gets evoked, then it becomes a physiological problem, and you need to reset the fear response. Yeah, yep. Oh, that's cool. I'm glad you heard that too, Rita. That's awesome. Yeah, so I would think about like, let me try this, and then like, if these don't work, I have kind of a thing that I do. This is also something, one thing on this topic too of managing anxiety, which I think is a huge part of taking this test for many, 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 many people. If that's your experience, you're very much not alone in it. Is do not, I'm going to do this in a soothing color. Do not start with a struggle. Do not stick with a struggle. What does this mean? Do not start means one, if the first problem is not good for you, just go to the next problem. And if that's not good, you can go to the next, right? But for me, when I hit that first quant section and I'm just starting the test, and I'm like, if I look at that first problem and I go, I don't want to do it because it's going to raise the level of shrieking like up higher. I need to go until I see a problem that makes me think, yeah, I can do this. Even if it's the fourth problem, right? Because then I can say, yeah, I can do this. I can sit, I can do it. I can bring the activation down and then go back to that first problem. And maybe then I realize the first problem isn't that bad. Or maybe I see it and I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do it, right? But begin, and as you take the test, notice, right? Oh, I'm too tense, I'm too activated, I need to pause, or just tracking that as you go is important. And that often, people ask me, how do I know which ones to not do? Because we're all supposed to not do some problems, which is important. And this is one way, this is part of it, right? But the question of what to do and not do, I can't give you just a simple set of rules because it's a very dynamic question. How I'm answering that question, should I do this problem or not do this problem, depends on a few different factors. And if we have time, we can get into them. So just let yourself begin the section with a good problem. And then if you get about like 1 minute in, you can decide, do you feel that you are 1 minute away? Or do you feel lost or stuck? So don't start a problem if you're anxious and it looks bad, and then don't stick with it if you hit a point where you feel like it's making me more anxious, I'm looping, I'm lost or stuck. Then just guess, mark if you want. There's that mark tool that can be helpful, and move on. I'm trying to make this an acronym because they say it so much. Guess, mark, and move on. So I'm trying to make GMM a thing. We'll see. I wanted it to be MGM, but then I didn't like mark, guess, move on. Didn't make any sense. It's this order that things would happen. So we're left with GM. Cool. All right. So there's some first questions. Yeah, great. So I'm gonna move on now to I have a bunch of other verbal questions. I'm going to do a bunch of other verbal questions, and then I'm going to get into one question. So we're going to do some verbal, and then we'll do some quant. I'm going to also just take a little moment of pause to address a question, which is, if you're starting out, how long will it take? I would say that, and this is where I think, you know, I think the test prep industry has not always said this, but this is how I feel. I think you should expect to spend 6 to 8 months preparing. Some people can do it faster. Some people need a little more time. I'd say like 3 to 12 is sort of the outliers. I've seen some processes longer than 12 that have ended in success, and I've seen some a little shorter than 3 that have ended in success. But that's sort of the 6 to 8 months seems to be average. And that's something I wish that, like, for example, when I taught a class, I could teach a 6-month class, but I don't know that people would do it. But this is just what I've observed from like realistic trajectories for how long things take. Some issues that will cause you to probably need more time is if you need, if like math is just not your friend historically, math fundamentals. If you have like really bad past experiences with these tests, then there's some element of kind of trauma from them that can take a little time to dismantle. And like sort of core reading skills, either related to just, I've similar to math fundamentals, right? Like, I've never liked English class, I've never liked writing essays, or English is my 7th language, or that kind of issue. That can take a little more time, because reading's a super complex skill. Building vocab, right? So that's the next thing I want to talk about, is building vocab. So I have good news, and I have some sort of good news, and I have some bad news. And so my good news, and I have some neutral news. So we'll do good news, neutral on the learning words front. The good news is, and this is also to address some nice questions that I got about dealing with sentence and equivalence and text completion, the vocab questions as a non-native English speaker, and maximizing studying. And that's a good question. I'll get to that. And how to get into vocab beginning. Cool. Really good questions. So good news is the level of the words tested, like the words on the test right now, are pretty moderate, right? Like most of my students come and report like, oh, I didn't see as many really rare words, right? Like they're more likely to be used regularly, more likely to be kind of in our working vocab. And that was my feeling too, taking the test, right? So I think a lot of published materials have words that are too hard. And I say this all the time about the Manhattan Prep materials with all the love in my heart for Manhattan Prep. Is I think that I see this broadly across providers of test prep materials, we over rely on really difficult, kind of esoteric, unusual words to create difficulty. The difficulty is in the sentences for the most part. And so this is why I actually think reading comp is the thing to practice. I focus probably when I work with, when I work with tutoring students, for example, I probably focus like 80% of my energy on reading comp and on doing flashcard work. And we don't do a ton of practice with vocab sentences. And it works out well. Like everyone's been doing well this fall for the most part. You do need to learn words, especially, especially if you are a non-native speaker, if you did some or all of your educational language other than English. Um, it'll be good to do. This can be slow, but I think a couple of things to keep in mind. The max that you can learn is 50 per week. Better to have paper flashcards. And I would look up something called a Lightner box. It's a tried and tested tool. It was developed, over 100 years ago. It works. It's developed to align with the way human memory works. You can find good resources about it on the internet. You can learn anything this way, right? You can learn vocab words, you can learn things like that. But max 50 per week. This is like the gold standard if you really want to get into it. Make your own paper flashcards. It is also fine to just get an app, right? So if you're like, I'm really busy, I have too many things to do, I need something simple that's not making a whole system out of paper flashcards, then just get an app. We get, Magoosh or whatever, and just do that a little bit, and that'll be good too. So at the end of the day, like the best vocab system is the one that you will use. So I would focus, if you're worried about sentence equivalence and text completion, I would actually focus a lot on the reading comp, because you'll also get, the reading comp will also be vocabulary building. Do your 10 to 15 minutes of flashcards a day. And I think that's like the best practices for setting yourself up. Wow. Another thing that I observed on the official test is that I feel, and this I think is reflected in the distribution of questions, that sentence equivalence is now feels more dominant than text completion. It used to be the other way around. Um, so I would think a little bit more about sentence equivalence, and I would especially work on the pairing, right? So the practice that you do in vocab, I would do more practice with sentence equivalence than text completion and pair. And then I've been encouraging people to skip the 3 blank text completion. There's now not a lot of them, there's only a couple. They tend to be slow and the odds are worse. So I think for a lot of people, it's good to just say, let's not do the 3 blank ones, because they don't give you more points than the 1 or 2 blank ones. And then use that time to be more accurate in reading comp. Because the gift of reading comp, right, is that everything you need to do it is there on the screen. It doesn't mean it's easy, right? But that's the gift. Great. So I got 2 questions that are actually sort of related, which I'm so psyched about. One is, isn't 6 to 8 months too exhausting? And the other is, how much time do I need to do every day if I'm spreading it out over 6 to 8 months? And what I think, and I think that these go hand in hand, right? So I would say 6 to 8 months, and I would say 45 minutes to 60 minutes a day, 5 to 6 days a week. No long marathon week. The only time I would do a long session is if I were doing a practice test. So yes, 6 to 8 months can be exhausting, but we need to, build new skills, learn new material. We need repetition spread over time. And I think, if you're just a few points from your goal score, right, you probably can do it in 3 months. But if you want to go like 4+ points in either section, then I think a longer timeline with consistent low intensity work. it will help you avoid burnout, but it's also, I think, the way to really build solid, trustworthy skills. And a huge problem that I see arise is people try to prep try to prep in like 2 months, let's say, and then it's very stressful and it doesn't produce results, and then they end up, needing another 2 months, and then another 2 months, and then another 2 months. And so this, I think, is like a potential trap to be careful of that I see happen sometimes. So that's my advice starting out, is like this. I think the processes that I see that are like most peaceful and most successful, because shorter processes can work, but they tend to be unpleasant and more difficult, is something like this. But the consistency is important, right? And a lot of times it's just getting started and getting that consistent habit going. That's the big challenge. And that's really important to think about. Cool. What resources do I recommend to review English grammar for the GRE? So you don't really need, this is the thing. And I may not be able to give the best answer to this question, because this is a little bit, I have taught grammar, but I have not taught grammar in a long time. I also teach writing, but I actually don't teach a lot of grammar in the writing that I teach. A whole bunch of reasons for that. But the GRE doesn't test grammar, right? So grammar is helpful, I think, as a tool for like, not going to get into that. I don't need to give everyone my thoughts on grammar, but what I do need to say is prioritize reading and vocabulary. So I would say, like, get like get some magazines, get some books, and just prioritize volume of reading at kind of a GRE like level, and make sure that you look up words. And if you need, look up words and things as needed to build vocabulary. And then if you find that there's sort of further study of grammar needed, then that might be a point to turn it, but I wouldn't necessarily lead with grammar. I don't think I've ever taught grammar as part of a GRE program, and I've worked with a lot of students who are not native English speakers over the years, with varying levels of language proficiency. So that's maybe how I would tackle that. And so because I don't really teach grammar, I don't have great resources to recommend. Khan Academy is always a place that I send people for stuff. You could also look at GMAT materials. GMAT does include grammar and sentence correction. So you could look at GMAT materials specifically for sentence correction. Maybe for grammar stuff, but I'm sorry that I don't have good things for that, but I don't like to I don't like to recommend things idly, right? I want to make sure I've used it and seen it and thought about it. And if you have follow-up questions on the grammar question, let me know, and I can hopefully be more helpful. All right, where are we for time? I want to talk a little bit about stats now. I got a specific ask for stats. Yeah, if you're finding that just like decoding the passage is hard, right? Just like, what is the sentence saying? This is an issue where you're going to want to budget some time for this, right? So this is going to put you on maybe a longer time horizon if this is the issue, decoding the passage. Some exercises that I have student, and I would just start with the passages and or other articles. And the exercise that I often have students do is write a sentence by sentence translation. um uh going from kind of like GRE English, right? Because I think there's this issue where like the GRE is in English, but like it's a very specific type of English that's not, the English that most of us move through the world with on a daily basis. So going from GRE English to like your English, just language that feels comfortable and clear to you. And just do that, take the sentence, do the best you can, right? And do it in writing. And I've done this, with students who are having this issue of like, I read the sentences and I just don't have no idea what they're trying to say. This will be slow and painful. It just is. It's a type of learning that takes a lot of mental energy. So like again, a little bit every day, be patient with yourself. But this is a really good exercise, I think, to do that. And then I have on very rare occasions had students where a solution has been to say, like, actually you maybe need more support just with the English language stuff and with the reading stuff. And then it might be like find maybe a tutor or something that specializes just in that. And I think often the people who work in that space can be a bit more affordable sometimes than the test room stuff. So just see, like, maybe try this and see if it helps, and kind of keep at it for a bit. And then the like best support for this issue maybe found outside specifically of like GRE prep materials, more with kind of um maybe specifically sort of support for like business English or academic English. That's always kind of a separate, the academic version of the language and the business version is always a little bit different than the day-to-day version. I hope that's helpful. It's a tricky issue, but it's fixable, right? And again, like I had a student who had this sort of issue and we spent maybe like a year, and then it ended great, ended in a really solid place. So think about also think about the type of program you're applying to, right? So, if you're applying to a program, like if you're applying to business school, probably quant and verbal should be kind of comparable. But if you're applying to like, if you're applying to an English PhD, verbal needs to be high. But if you're applying to like, a like mechanical or aerospace engineering program, like you can get away with a lower verbal score in relation to your quant score. So I'd also think too a little bit about that in determining time. Cool. Good. Awesome. All right. I got a request for a type of specific type of stats question. So we're going to learn a little math, and I'm going to see if I can quickly pull up a good problem. So I'm going to need a second to find a good problem to answer this next question. And while I do that, if anyone has follow-up questions that they want to ask, please do, because I'm like, I'm efficient tonight. So I'm either just really, really on it, or maybe I'm not getting you thorough answers to your questions, right? So if you feel like I have only answered your question in part or not understood your question correctly, let me know. I took the GMAT. I've taken the GMAT a couple of times, and I took the GMAT once, and I finished the quant really early. And I was like, gosh, wow, I'm so great. I thought I had such a hard time with GRE Quant, but now I finished GRE Quant so early. I mean, GMAT Quant so early. And I did not do well. I was so overconfident. So that's also a good point too for everyone who's taken the test soon, is that your sense of how it's going and how it's actually going are not going to be well aligned. Let's see. And I also want to teach. I have something else I want to teach too. Noelle, if you also have a specific problem to nominate too, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to try to find a 5-pound book problem that I think fits your description. Good. Oh, I found one. I think I found a good one. All right. So I think, no, is this one you were thinking of? This is, I was just like, oh, I got it. And I got this one. And then I saw your chat and I was like, oh, I wonder if we're talking about the same number 21. Cool. Yeah. All right. So we're going to try this hard question, number 61. I'm going to give us about 2 minutes to just work on it on our own. And then at the end of those 2 minutes, I'll show you um, how I did it. I'm gonna work on white paper, I think, for this one. And but what I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna do it alongside you, and I'm gonna try to do it the way that I would do it on the official test. So I'll show you kind of scratch work that resembles what my official test scratch work would look like. So here is the question. Use the most current versions, Megan. That's a great question. I would try to use the most current versions because the test has changed recently and has changed over time, and like the like the big GRE book is really outdated stuff in it, and it causes some problems. All right, let's spend about 2 minutes. I'm gonna go off camera just so you can work on the question without me staring at you, and then I'll show you my work and we'll talk about it and go from there. All right. I found I needed a lot more time with this one. I probably needed about 4 minutes with this one tonight. Um, maybe like 3.5 minutes. I probably always need about 3.5 minutes with this. Um, hang on a sec. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second because I've Zoom is glitching. We'll come back. So here's our question. And I'm going to show you my work and I'm going to talk you through what it looked like. And I think what you're going to see is that I am not spectacular at math. We probably don't have time to do a practice RC question. I'm just seeing this, but come back, and if you're still working in January, come back. Do one in January and we can prioritize. I would actually love to do a passage in one of these, like as a live demonstration, show my note taking and stuff. Now Pete, you're good. You got it. You're ready. You are ready to go and take your test on Monday. So here's my work. Here's what it looks like. Hang on a sec. Zoom is so. Oh, the Zoom update's really kind of trying my patience a little bit, but we'll get there. So here is my work now that the technology has complied. And I'll show you. I think you'll see that like I'm not great at math, but I know how to get through it. And I'm real tired today. So this is good. I think this will show. So the first thing that to notice is that I started out by taking a lot of space and just taking notes, right? So I said, you know, this cereal, there's X and it's 55%, and there's Max and it's 75%. And I should have probably written the word fiber here. And we're going to combine them and we're going to get 65% fiber. And I should have probably also put that we're going to have 12 ounces total. So then I wrote down the average formula, and then I was like, what? This isn't really an average question. So that was silly. But sometimes you just do, you know, I was just like, I'm just going to do something, right? And it kind of helped me settle and my brain processed. And so then I thought about it and I was like, well, what else can I do, right? Well, I know that the percent, right? And I know how much fiber there is, right? So, or I know what the total is, right? So I said, no, I'm not going to do average. I'm going to do my proportion. I like choose proportion. So percent over 100 equals part over whole. And my part is going to be fiber, right? And then my whole is going to be the actual size of the sample. So I could use that to then calculate the amount of fiber. And then I did something bad. So notice that at the beginning, I'm taking a lot of space. If I'm stressed, if I'm confused, I take a lot of space. My work gets bigger when I'm less confident and smaller when I'm more confident, which is counterintuitive, right? But if you're, for example, if you're spinning and you want to slow down, you need to get bigger. If you get smaller, you'll spin more. So when you're anxious, you need to get bigger and then contract when you feel comfortable. But instead of expanding, at this point, I was like, oh no, I'm too slow. I'm too slow tonight. And then I started to rush. So this is where I start to rush, and notice how cramped it gets. I'll write out a nicer version of this algebra and explain it to you. And then I realized that I didn't need to rush because I'm teaching this class, right? And I could, I could just take a little more time, and you'd probably all like to have a little more time too, maybe. So eventually I sort of got out of that mindset, but you never need to rush, right? You, instead of rushing, either decide, like, am I going to take the time? And if I'm going to take the time, I'm going to get it right. Or am I going to not take the time and then I'm just going to move on? So the answer is never to rush. Rushing is not a solution to anything. It makes everything worse. So when you notice these moments, inevitable, right? That we have our moments that aren't great. And you just say, oh, I'm Russian. I need to remind myself I'm in control of this process. I'm in control of this experience. So here's what's going on with this algebra here. I'm saying like X equals the total amount, total ounces, let's say, of cereal X, and M equals the total ounces. Here I think that the of cereal max. What is fiber? I was having this conversation with a friend recently. We're like, we don't actually have no clue what fiber is. Jesus, yeah. Still don't know. Still not an adult. I feel like when I know what fiber really is, I'll be an adult. um, so I have these variables, right? And so I say, okay, I have two unknowns. I don't know the amount of either of these, right? I just know that I'm taking some amount of this and some amount of that. They have these different concentrations and I'm adding them together. So I establish my variables and then I immediately know when I have two unknowns, I need to have two equations. So as soon as I see this, I think equation 1 and equation 2. And I know just because I've done these, right? Like some of this is just pattern recognition over time, right? I know, oh yeah, there's always that total one, right? So I can say just like the total amount of X plus the total amount of M equals 12. And then I'd say, okay, cool. So then I can also write an equation for this amount of fiber that I found. I didn't originally know why I was doing this also. Like I was just like, let me just find the amount of fiber because I think that's the right thing to do. And then it was. But then this was not the right thing to do. So sometimes you just try things and it goes one way or the other, and then you deal with it. And then this is the other one. So I'm like, cool, I'm gonna have two equations. There's gonna be my total equation, and then there's gonna be my like part equation. And this again is sort of a common pattern in these. So, they're super tricky, but when you eventually kind of get them to click, then it's the same patterns over and over. So I have my two variables, my two equations. Now it becomes an algebra problem. And this is again, I'm just writing these down so I can show the algebra on like a nice, neat, organized sheet of paper for you. But this again is where I sort of dropped the ball and got into trouble, and why it took me a really long time to do this question, and this was not great. This is why you should be rested when you take the test, so you don't do things like this. Then I crammed it in, right? Because I was rushing, I made it so small, and then I had to sort of move it down here. And look how chaotic it gets, right? And I broke my rule, right? I can never do more than one step at a time, but I tried to do the distribution for the stack and add, and it was a mess. And I made a mistake. And so when I originally got to my answer, I got 28, and that was clearly not right. Then I had to go back and find the mistake and correct. So this again was like not a great moment, even though I did eventually get there. Also, I used a calculator a lot on here, right? So absolutely do use the calculator. There is nothing wrong with that. Just to complete the problem, and then I think that will be our night. But just to complete the algebra. So for me, gosh, maybe it would have been better to do this as a substitution problem, actually, now that I look at it. So I feel like maybe I'm going to do it as a substitution problem this time instead of a stack and add, because I think the stack and add was gnarly. So I'm ultimately solving for x, right? And you remember that from the problem, that x is the variable that I want to solve. So I'm going to say, cool, x equals 12 minus m. And then I can take that. No, I'm going to do it the other way around because I want to plug in for m. M equals 12 minus x. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug in for m, so that always my goal when I do two equations, two variables, is to end up with this one equation with one variable. And now I'm going to bring out my calculator. Distributing. I'm going to subtract 8.4 from both sides. Again, doing that on a calculator. I personally do not like decimal math in my head. I'm so tired. I'm going to do 0.55 minus 0.7 too. um, and I'm going to divide both sides by negative 0.15. If I've already done this step, but I did this in the calculator again, right? If you're tired, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, give yourself more support, more calculator, more paper, and I get x equals 4. This is a great problem to not do, right? Or like mark it and come back to it at the end. It's so long, it's so stressful. Look at this mass. But I think my takeaways from this are more stress, more paper, right? Or whiteboard, same thing applies on the whiteboard. Increase stress, increase paper, increase organization. When we get stressed, sometimes we want to go faster, and that's not what we want to do with something like this. But also, you're allowed to not do. Don't try to do. This is going to be my last reminder and blessing for those of you who have the test really soon, which I think is a lot of us. Do not do every problem, especially in either, whatever quantiverbal is your biggest fear. Do not do every problem. I always tell my students, aim for, 90% of 80%, right? And that's going to get you above 160 if you can execute that. Maybe you aim for 100% of 80%. That's going to get you above 160. But you're not ever aiming for 100% in your preparation or in your test taking. It's hard. That one's hard, I think. It seems simple, but I think it's hard. Yes. A niche, bigger question, but if you go, we post all these free prep hours on YouTube. So go to our YouTube channel, Manhattan Prep GRE. There's some videos specifically about the essay there, and that's a great resource, actually, for you in general starting out. So please do. You're so welcome. All right. So I have a special couple special shout outs. Now, Preet, it has been really fun having you in these free prep hours. I am going to miss you in these free prep hours, but I'm hopefully not going to see you in these again, because I feel very confident that you're going to get what you need and be done. And not always my hope for everyone is that they don't have to take the GRE again. So I've seen you come in here and asking thoughtful questions. I know you're working hard. You've put in your time, you've put in your hours. I hope you get great luck. I hope you get all the quant you like and none of the vocab words you don't know, and you get a good, easy test. And for you, a good test aligns with you. And I hope you then get to rest and spend time with friends and family and celebrate the end of the year. Best of luck, and be thinking of you. Noelle, if I'm not in touch with you before your test date, also lots of I think for you, like calm and centeredness, and you can do this, and you will do this. And I've also seen you work hard and make really great progress. So just folks I've gotten to work with over some time and who are almost done. And for everyone else who's taking the test, I know we have a couple other folks here you are so welcome, Anish, who are taking the test soonish, in the next few weeks. Don't forget that rest is important toward the end. And if anyone has a longer prep horizon, I do these every month. I'll be back in January with another. And I write a little blog about the GRE and the tarot that I'm, gonna post. I'm gonna do a post about my test. So that's my other thing. Cool. Have a lovely night. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking great questions. I hope you all get through the dark part of the year if you're in a place where it's the dark part of the year. Have a lovely, lovely end of the year and a great start to the new year. And I will maybe see some of you in 2024, but some of you I'm not going to see because you're going to be done. Have a good night, guys.